Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Is there a new starter emerging on the Texas offensive line ahead of the Ohio State game? We'll talk about that in this latest edition of On Texas Football, which is brought to you by our friends at South Point Dodge. Gerry will tell you more about South Point here in a little bit. But Gerry, Connor Stroh is a guy that Sark has mentioned quite a bit in recent weeks as far as a guy that's been developing, that's been evolving, been improving. And based on what we reported over at ontexasfootball.com on Wednesday afternoon, that's not just coach speak from the head man.
No, it's not. And, we were told last week that Stroh even mixed in with the ones at left guard at times. And we believe that remains to be the case, and that Connor Stroh has pushed Neto to the max. And there is been a true competition there. And that Connor Stroh, look, we expect to see him on the field in Columbus Saturday, barring a change. Now, is that going to be as the starter? Is that going to be as a rotational player? We shall see. But we do believe that this has been a real competition at the start for the starting left guard spot as this camp has moved along, and that Connor Stroh has made really big gains headed into his third year in the program. And I think that is that's a very, very big thing. He got his weight under control. He's listed at 6'7", 341. He was closer to 375, 380 at times at Texas. He's done a good job with his weight management there, which has been a struggle for him just because of how large of a human being he is. But there's something to be said for his ability in the run game to create a push like Neto does, create a push, but he's been really sound in assignments in pass pro in fall camp.
Gerry, does he remind you at all of Hayden Conner? Not different body type, different player, but from the standpoint of you didn't really know what the floor or the ceiling was when they got to campus. But Hayden Conner was a self-made guy, really did a great job transforming his body and did a lot of work to turn himself into a draft pick. You think Connor Stroh could have that same kind of career arc?
We'll see as this goes along, because he's still got to go play in games this year, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing is I'm always one of those guys that's hesitant on some guys in practice versus then you get in there at a game and things start moving really fast around you. Now you've been in the program a while. You're accustomed to going against elite talent across from you on a practice-to-practice basis, drill-to-drill basis. But then when you get in games, you still have to go out and perform in games. But I will say this. I do think the biggest thing that Connor Stroh, and there's some stick-to-itiveness with him, because he stayed in the program. Look, and Flood's done a good job keeping guys from transferring out, right? And that class that came in with Arch Manning, those guys, the Jaden Chapmans, the Connor Strohs, those guys have remained in the program, right, by and large. So I think there's a stick-to-itiveness there. I think there's a taking what Kyle Flood and Torrey Becton have told him and taking it to heart. And Mac done everything he can to maximize the things that Torrey Becton and Kyle Flood have asked him to do. And the biggest thing was getting down to that 340, 345 playing weight to where he could be effective. Because he's not a super twitched up athlete. So he has to be able to move quick enough, like a Hayden Conner, to your point, to where he can hold up against the elite athletes you're going to be facing in the SEC and on this Texas schedule, man, Saturday in Columbus. So I think that stick-to-itiveness is the one thing I would say for him. Obviously, he's a physical guy. He was a big-time power lifter in high school. He's got all the strength numbers, right? He's one of the strongest players in the program. But he had to get to a level weight-wise to where he could move well enough to really win, and Texas trust him to win his one-on-one battles to where they don't need for him to have help in pass pro, because that's a tough spot to be in for Texas. But I think Connor Stroh's had from everything, he's had a really good fall camp, and he has made a strong move.
Gerry, that offensive line is a unique organism. We know Kyle Flood, even going back to year one, outside of injuries, they just didn't rotate a ton. What we've heard has happened in camp would lead you to believe that maybe there's going to be some more rotating, at least that we've grown accustomed to seeing. But, Gerry, is this a game where you really want to tinker more than you have to with the offensive line combination?
No, look, you don't see a ton of rotation on offensive line, right? I mean, it's talked about, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you want to create continuity too. I mean,
Right.
look, there's 4 new starters. You want to create continuity. It's hard to create continuity with a lot of rotation. So I think the 5 that walk out there against Ohio State are, barring injury, are the 5 they want to play that 90% of the snaps in this game. And that doesn't mean some other guys can't get in, but I don't think there's going to be this rotation on the offensive line. I think you want to start building continuity on your offensive line in games. That's why the competition has been so important in fall camp.
No doubt. All right. We will get to a couple more names that we want to mention as far as guys that are emerging up the depth chart quickly ahead of the game. But we'll do that after Jerry tells us about our good friends at South Point Dodge.
Well, this was an easy read. Hey, Texas football fans, score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock, including the all-new 2025 Ram 1500. Get the real deal today and drive away in an all-new Ram. It's proven to last. You know that. Plus, you can get employee incentive pricing. That's right, guys. You can pay what our employees pay at South Point Dodge. Now that is a real deal. So score big today at South Point Dodge. Come see us off I-35 in South Austin or at South Point Dodge. And remember this, it's very simple. Get to the point at South Point Dodge.
Jerry, let's go over to defense and talk about Grayson Littleton. He might have been, there was a lot of guys that came onto the scene during camp, but he might have been the most talked about guy in camp. What do you think is going to be his role on Saturday?
Yeah, so I think he's a guy who's been pushing for a starting position. Would it surprise us if he was on the field a lot or very, very, very early? No, it would not. He has a lot of similarities, Jeff, to me. The same things are being said. And a lot of people have have compared it to defensive players. What about what Sark was saying about Cedric Baxter when Cedric Baxter first got to Austin? And what we heard behind the scenes, mentally had picked up everything he needed to. He could recite the defense, right? Cedric Baxter, I mean, Arch Manning gave him the best compliment a running back can get. He's like a quarterback out there playing running back, okay? Well, Grayson Littleton, Rod Babers talks about it all the time and 100% agree. It's the most difficult position to play is the nickel position. Well, as a freshman, you're ready to compete for a starting job there. That means you're the same guy as Cedric Baxter, just on another side of the football. Mm-hmm. That means, yeah, you can cover slot fade better than everybody. Bobby's reported on that. Yes, you have elite makeup speed, turn and run speed, but you have to be able to be assignment sound and understand what everybody else is doing around you in their assignments. That is a big thing for me with a kid like Grayson Littleton and Cedric Baxter as a freshman. Freshmen that do that can really, truly push for starting spots. The whole key there is, does Grayson Littleton, is he your starting nickel? And then you have Taff and you have Jelani McDonald, your safeties, and you bring Derek Williams off the bench? Is that a potentially something Texas would do there? We'll wait and see. But Grayson Littleton this is carried over from spring to fall camp. He has made a push to be on the field very early in Columbus, very early. And you can only do that if the coaches have ultimate trust in you understanding what your teammates are also doing on the field outside of you and their assignments, because it just doesn't – you're not just going to put him out there and put him on an island and say, go cover this guy, go cover slot fade. It's not going to work that way. It's going to be he's assignment sound beyond himself, his defensive back teammates, and others on the defensive side of the ball.
Jerry, you made a great point there, and I want to come back to that. But when you talk about Grayson Littleton, you talk about that nickel position. This is the kind of game where no matter which coordinators you're talking about, you want to try to break tendency. One really good way for Ohio State to break tendency would be to put Jeremiah Smith in the slot more. You look at their wide receivers from last year, Jerry. Brandon Ennis, over 80% of his snaps were in the slot. He's almost exclusively that guy. But Jeremiah Smith, only about 15% of his snaps last year came in the slot. If you want to break tendency and really test the Texas defense at that nickel position to see where they are, that might be a really good way to do it.
Yeah, it might be a way to do it. And I think Ohio State's going to do whatever they can to get the ball in Jeremiah Smith's hands early in this game. They do not want it to go into halftime and he has one catch for 9 yards or something crazy like that. just a year ago, having 1 for 3. That's not going to happen. And they're going to look for ways to get the ball in his hand. And it could be putting him in the slot. And then the question would be, what does Texas do at corner? Does the corner travel and then cover the slot at times to stay on whoever they want to match up with Jeremiah Smith? I don't know. Not likely. But we'll see what happens there. I think the other thing to factor in with this, if Grayson Littleton's on the field very early in Columbus, is there more of a trust in Michael Taff at safety working with a Jelani McDonald or a Derek Williams than Jelani and Derek Williams in tandem together? Because those guys are both aggressive players downhill, Jeff.
Right.
And that leaves you – what Texas had last year that was unbelievable as a secondary was great continuity, communication, and very few glaring busts. If you have busts in your secondary, especially at your safety positions against Ohio State, and I'm not saying they would, I'm just saying the combinations they've been looking at to get the 5 best on the field, then if you have coverage busts at safety in this game, they're touchdowns. They're not first downs. That's the difference.
Yeah, the offensive line and the secondary are the two positions where your mistakes can easily cost you a game, turning the ball over, giving up a big play, what have you. Jerry, as we close up, I want to go back to something you said about trust. Sark mentioned that on Wednesday on the SEC coaches teleconference, and he was talking about wide receiver. He, again, with Emmett Mosley, the fifth's availability, he just said he's limited this week. And then he was asked about which of those young receivers are ready to step up. This is the quote from Sark, Jerry, quote, "At the end of the day, it's not about ability. It's what you're able to do. What you're able to do is what ultimately you show us. And then if you can do it consistently, that earns our trust. When you have our trust, we're going to play you." So, Jerry, let's assume no Emmett Mosley on Saturday for Texas. Once you get past Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore, you're talking about guys that have played either very little or no football. Other than Parker Livingstone, who fills out that wide receiver rotation on Saturday?
Well, look, I think number 4 would be Dalen McCutcheon, but the thing there is how much is DeAndre Moore going to come off the field Saturday, right? Then I think Khalil Lockett has come on in fall camp. And you know what? He came in out of Saxe High as a pretty, I don't want to say thin, very wiry kid, because he was a young kid as a graduating senior in December, and he had the super long arms, the 11-inch hands. That frame needed time. Well, he's added 12 to 15, 14 pounds, a lot of it in his lower body since he's been at Texas. So strength-wise, he's come on, and I think that's enabled him, obviously, from the spring to fall camp, picking up things, learning nuances of the position, becoming more of a complete route runner, so to speak, although I think his strength is still 50-50 balls, back shoulder balls, maybe a red zone guy that has great timing leaving his feet. But I think he has shown a lot to start to earn some of that trust. So the question would be, Jeff, is which position, you figured DeAndre Moore is going to be on the field a lot of the game, right? If for some reason he comes off the field, Dalen McCutcheon's probably your slot receiver. If one of the outside receivers come off the field, when they're in 3 wide, then it's got to be Khalil Lockett right now. I think that's where we're at, and we'll see if all 5 of those guys are actually in the circle of trust or if it's 4.
Yeah, that's why I think Jack injuries could be huge in this game, but we'll talk about that on another edition of On Texas Football, because that's going to do it for this one. Jerry, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. If you're not a member, over to ontexasfootball.com. Get over there right now. You'd have gotten the Connor Stroh news and our offensive line tidbits there around lunchtime on Wednesday. If you were an OTFOG, if you're not, it's okay. You can become one right now. Get over there, sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Again, the promo code is OTFOG. Make sure you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or over on the site, you're not missing anything leading up to the blockbuster showdown on Saturday between Texas and Ohio State. For Jerry, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, and our friends at South Point Dodge for sponsoring it, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and until next time, welcome.